My name is Nathan Heller, 43 years old. And for 11 years, I was the guy they called when systems broke, when clients screamed, when competitors loomed. The guy who never took sick days, never asked for stock options, never raised his voice. At Kinex Global, I was what they called a legacy operator. Quiet, effective, predictable. A good soldier. I joined in 2011, back when Kinex was still a buzzword buried under freight invoices and crash reports. Logistics wasn't sexy back then. Nobody cared about optimizing pallet space or real-time lane tracking. But I did. I always did. The company was 3 founders and a rented office over a tire shop in Omaha. My interview was over a basket of hot wings. I just walked away from a failing startup in Milwaukee with more debt than options, and they needed someone who could build a product that wouldn't fall apart mid-demo. I wrote our first API by candlelight during a blackout, slept in the office during 2 major software rollouts, hired every junior dev we had for the first 5 years. By 2017, I was VP of Product. By 2019, we had offices in Austin and Chicago. By 2021, we hit $40 million in ARR. I wasn't flashy. I didn't tweet. I didn't take credit for things I didn't build. But our churn rate was the lowest in the sector. Clients stayed. Pilots turned into long-term contracts. I didn't need a billboard. My work spoke loud enough in quarterly board meetings. And then came the pivot. The word every operator dreads. New CEO, new strategy, new everything. His name was Clayton Rowe, mid-30s, polished, MBA from Stanford, McKinsey pedigree, former growth lead at a unicorn that hadn't turned a profit since inception. He wore sneakers with suits and started every all-hands with, "Let me disrupt your thinking real quick." In his first month, he held what he called impact audits. I sat in front of him while he skimmed a 1-page printout of my department's metrics and asked, "Do you think you're scaling yourself out of relevance?" He blinked. "I'm sorry?" Clayton smiled. "You've got great institutional memory, but we're moving toward AI-led product iteration and platform autonomy. You're very manual." Manual. That was the beginning of the end. It happened 6 weeks later. I was called into a 10 a.m. coffee chat with HR and someone from Strategic Ops. They told me Kinex was realigning product leadership to focus on automation-driven growth. That I had done amazing work bringing us to this stage. That they were offering me a generous severance, with the option to stay on as a transitional consultant for 30 days if I wanted to wrap things cleanly. I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't even ask who was replacing me. I already knew. Her name was Riley Westbrook, 29, MBA, came from a fintech startup that exploded on TikTok. She'd shadowed me for a month and asked exactly one question. What's the plan to move product road mapping onto a predictive AI engine? She never asked what clients wanted, never sat through onboarding calls, never once asked why we kept a 93% renewal rate without advertising. To her, I was legacy code, dead weight. I packed my things into 2 boxes, one for my desk stuff, one for what mattered. Client notes, dev journals, paper printouts from our earliest design sprints, even a photo of the whiteboard sketch that eventually became our freight matching engine. I took the long way out of the building, past the old server room, past the hallway where we'd slept in sleeping bags after an AWS failure in 2015. The lobby smelled like fresh paint and new money. But the soul of the place? Gone. On my way out, I passed Clayton. He nodded like we were both boarding different flights at an airport lounge. "Nathan," he said, "thanks for the foundation. Time for us to scale." I nodded back. I wanted to say something sharp, something cutting. But instead, I just said, "Don't forget who built it." He smiled, already forgetting. I drove home in silence. No radio, just me and the hum of highway. I wasn't angry. I was awake, wide awake, because in their race to automate, they forgot the one thing that couldn't be replaced. Context. I'd spent 11 years mapping client pain, code by code, decision by decision. I didn't have access to the codebase anymore, but I had something better. The reasons why it worked in the first place. That night, I opened my laptop. No plan, no pitch deck, no name, just a blank document. Title, What They Forgot. The operating system behind trust. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was restoration. Because they could copy my interface, rebuild my logic, automate my responses. But what they couldn't replicate, the trust, the nuance, the human intuition that knew when a client's fine actually meant fix it before Monday. They didn't fire a builder. They freed one. And now, I had nothing holding me back. 3 weeks. That's how long it took before the first cracks began to show. I had kept quiet. No angry LinkedIn post, no back-channel phone calls. I didn't need to. I knew the silence would do more damage than noise ever could. Then, on a foggy Monday morning, I got a text. Hey Nate, weird question, did they fire you? Jonas R. VP Logistics, Trident Freight Systems. I stared at the message. Jonas and I had worked together for nearly a decade. We'd built a real-time shipment tracker together over 3 sleepless weeks when his entire system was crashing. He still called me when he needed real talk, not dashboards. I replied simply, let go, 3 weeks ago. 30 seconds later, the phone rang. Nate, Jonas said, his voice sharp. They assigned me a new account growth analyst. Kid can't tell a dry dock from a grocery truck. Told me Kinex is optimizing human touchpoints. I told him I'm not a F. ING touchpoint. I smiled quietly. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. You gonna start something new? Maybe. Start it. We're in. That was all. No pitch. No proposal. Just trust. By the end of that day, I had 5 more messages like Jonas's. From people I hadn't called. People I hadn't warned. People who noticed that something essential had disappeared from the way Kinex worked. The message they didn't expect wasn't mine. It was the client's. And it was simple. Where's Nathan? The pattern unfolds. In the next 10 days, I heard from Marla Torres, Colorado O, of an agri-shipping cooperative in Kansas, who I once helped manually reroute a wheat delivery during a flood. Chad Nomura, director of fleet operations at a Canadian border distributor, who still remembered the handwritten freight matrix I built for his auditors in 2016. Leanne Griffith, a 26-year-old startup founder who once said, Nathan's the only one who didn't talk to me like I was a child when I was raising pre-seed. None of them had been contacted by me. All of them felt my absence. What Kinex never understood was that product wasn't the platform. I was. The spreadsheet that started it all. I built it in Google Sheets at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, while eating leftover pizza. It was titled simply, Recoverable Trust, Phase 1. The first column listed client names I'd worked with personally. The second, their current contract expiration dates. The third, an estimate of how quickly I believed I could win them back without asking. By the time I'd filled the 27th row, I realized I didn't have a revenge plan. I had a roadmap. The irony? Kinex's new AI system couldn't build this kind of predictive modeling. Why? Because you can't automate emotional memory. Just checking in. By the start of week 5, Kinex had noticed. One of my old teammates sent me a screenshot from Slack. Eden Shaw, product marketing lead. Anyone know why renewal conversations with Trident, Rayner Group, and Agritrack have all stalled in Q2? Feedback is vague. Change in tone feels off. Mason, CX analyst. Wasn't Nate their lead on all 3? Eden. Yes, but we've moved beyond dependency on individual contributor models. I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. They thought loyalty was code you could refactor. It wasn't. It was earned context. The coffee shop meeting. I met Jonas from Trident in person that Friday. We didn't sit in a boardroom. We sat in a coffee shop 2 blocks from a truck depot. He wore a windbreaker, still smelled faintly like diesel. He brought printouts. Here's our usage data since you left, he said. Everything's trending downward. Exception rates up, support tickets up, response times tanked. He looked me in the eye. You gonna fix this from the outside? I plan to. How soon? I smiled. Soon. Good. Because I'm bringing 3 partners with me. We'll pilot whatever you've got. I hadn't even incorporated yet, but I wrote the name on a napkin. Sundial Systems. Jonas nodded. Sounds like something built by someone who knows which way the sun rises. The realization. When I got home that night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened a new document. Sundial Systems. Founding Principles. Trust is not scalable, but it is transferable. Every dashboard must connect to a name, not just a number. No client should ever have to repeat a problem twice. No user is legacy if they're still paying you. If you solve a problem quietly, your brand will grow loudly. I stared at that list for a long time. Kinex hadn't just made a mistake. They had created the perfect market gap, and it had my name all over it. The first version of Sundial Systems wasn't fancy. It was a clunky dashboard built on open-source frameworks, glued together by insomnia, caffeine, and 11 years of hard-earned insight. It had no logo, no powered by tag. It didn't need one. The only thing it had? Accuracy. Jonas at Trident gave me access to their back-end data and permission to pilot on 3 freight lanes. His only request: show me you still know how trucks think. So I did. I rebuilt the route engine from scratch, not based on predictive algorithms or venture buzzwords, but on real field behavior. Drivers avoid certain refuel stops because of slope grade. Warehouses prefer arrivals before 7 a.m. to avoid double shifts. The new Kinex system didn't know that. But I did. By week 2, Jonas's freight delay rate had dropped 17.6%. By week 3, his dispatcher ticket volume was down 22%. He didn't say thank you. He just sent me a photo of a whiteboard from his ops floor. On it, Sundial test lanes. Keep these forever. Word spreads quietly. I didn't promote anything. Didn't publish case studies. Didn't post screen recordings or build a landing page. But people started hearing. Not from me. From Jonas. From Marla. From Chad. One by one they sent quiet referrals. Not flashy intros. Just, talk to Nathan. He's solving this. Within 45 days, I had 6 pilot programs running. 3 in agri-shipping. 1 with a border inspection routing system. 1 in specialty medical freight. And none of it involved a single sales call. Meanwhile at Kinex, I got my first sign they'd noticed when a former engineer texted me. Yo, you still around? Kinex just rolled out Vive 2 of Predictamap. Half the clients are asking where you went. I replied, I'm building. He answered, good, because they're not. The next week, an internal email from Kinex was leaked to me. It was from Eden Shaw, their new VP of product, sent to the entire ops team. We're seeing anomalies in client retention. Several mid-tier accounts have gone dark or reduced usage. We believe a former employee is engaging in unauthorized consulting. Legal is exploring next steps. I read that line 3 times. Unauthorized consulting. As if trust could be trademarked. I hadn't signed a non-compete, they'd remove that clause to expedite my exit. Now, they were watching their revenue trail me like an unattended train car. They couldn't stop the pilot. Because the pilot wasn't code. It was me. The invite I ignored. 3 days later, I received an email from Clayton Rowe. Subject: let's talk open to possibilities. It was polite, professional, even respectful, in a cold, PR-filtered way. Nathan, I've been hearing great things about what you're building. Would love to catch up, share ideas. We may even find alignment again in the future. I stared at that word alignment and felt nothing. No anger, no triumph. Just a soft internal no. I hadn't changed, but I had. I didn't reply. The system that knew when to shut up. One of Sundial's early core features wasn't code at all. It was a note system. Each client got a profile card not for KPIs or metrics but for memory. Marla prefers early Monday morning updates. Jonas's team changes shifts at 2 p.m. sharp, never call after. Dr. Rains once lost a shipment during his wedding anniversary week. Never schedule sensitive freight for early July. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. Because the one thing every AI optimization forgets is this. The things clients don't say are usually the things they care about most. Sundial didn't predict behavior. It remembered people. The 6th pilot and the first real threat. One afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, is this Nathan Heller? Yes. This is Diane Merrill. I run logistics for Pharmatech North. I froze. Pharmatech was one of Kinex's prized accounts worth close to $2.5 million annually. She continued. We've been watching. Some of our vendors mentioned what you're doing. I stayed quiet. I'm not here to poach, she said quickly. I just want to understand. Can your system actually adjust for medical-grade freight deviations without pre-programmed weights? I answered honestly. Yes, but not with a single click. With context. That's the difference. A pause. Would you consider a limited shadow pilot for 1 quarter? This wasn't a small client. This was the elephant. And now, it was knocking on my door. The moment I knew. That night, I walked into my apartment, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the window. Across the skyline, I could still see the Kinex tower. Blue neon, cold and bright. A year ago, I would have done anything to be back in that office. Now, I finally understood. They weren't the company anymore. I was. Because a company isn't its pitch deck or its valuation. It's the way your name is spoken in rooms you're not in. And mine? It was starting to echo. Pharmatech North wasn't just any client. They were a pharmaceutical logistics, Titan handling everything from time-sensitive vaccines to temperature-critical organ transport. Their margin for error wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in lives. That's why their call changed everything. Diane Merrill, VP of Logistics, didn't waste time with flattery or small talk. She needed results, not promises. So when she proposed a shadow pilot, a confidential trial to compare Sundial's performance against Kinex's existing platform, I understood what it meant. This wasn't a trial run. It was a test of trust. 3 months, she said, side by side. If your system outperforms theirs, we renegotiate. I didn't ask what renegotiate meant. I knew. Sundial versus Kinex. The silent showdown. Diane gave me access to one corridor. Denver to Phoenix. High volume, temperature, sensitive, with strict compliance reporting. One error, one delay, one misstep, and I was out. But I wasn't nervous, because I'd handled this lane before. Years ago. When Pharmatech first came to Kinex, I'd personally built their compliance configuration layered buffers to anticipate desert route heat surges and regional carrier blackouts. Kinex still used that setup. They just didn't remember why it worked. But I did. Sundial didn't try to be clever. It was simple. It monitored wind speed alerts from rural Arizona routes. It reprioritized carrier selection during 90 degrees Fahrenheit plus spikes, even if it meant slightly higher fuel costs. And it automatically rerouted cold chain payloads to crossload at 3 a.m. when ice supplies were freshest. Kinex missed those nuances. They had replaced logic with machine averages. And machines don't remember that Route 285 always floods just after monsoon season. Week 2. The first slip. An internal Kinex contact leaked me a dashboard screenshot. Pharmatech's Kinex-controlled corridor had experienced a 4.3% increase in thermal deviation flags. That same week, Sundial's deviation rate? 0. Not 1%. 0. Diane didn't comment. She didn't need to. Week 5, the offer. At the halfway mark, I received a call. Not from Pharmatech. From Everett Lang, Chief Revenue Officer at Kinex. Nathan, he began, we've heard whispers that you've been consulting with some of our past clients, particularly Pharmatech. I didn't answer. We're not calling to challenge it. We're calling to talk options. We're open to collaboration. I let the silence hang. Everett continued. Clayton believes. Clayton doesn't believe anything. I cut in. He reacts. There was a pause. Then Everett asked, almost wearily, what would it take to bring you back? I already knew my answer. I had written it down weeks ago. I'm not coming back. I'm building forward. He exhaled. We're prepared to make a substantial offer. No amount of money will give you what you lost, Everett. You didn't fire a technician. You amputated your instincts. Click. I didn't wait for a reply. Week 9. The decision. Diane called me at 6:13 p.m. on a Friday. We've compiled the comparative data, she said. Our legal team is reviewing final contract language. Understood. I'll be honest, she said. Your system outperformed theirs across all 5 core metrics by double-digit percentages. That's good to hear. But that's not why we're switching. I said nothing. She continued. It's because your system doesn't treat us like a trend line. It treats us like an obligation. That's what logistics is. It's not optimization. It's accountability. Then, in the calmest voice imaginable, we'd like to sign a 24-month exclusive with Sundial. The contract would be worth over $3.2 million annually. I was quiet for a long time. And then I said what I'd wanted to say for years. Let's move forward. The fallout. 2 days later, Kinex stock dropped 6%. Pharmatech was their second largest account. The departure leaked to the press as a strategic repositioning, but I knew better. Inside Sundial, I had a Slack channel called Number Roots. It wasn't for clients. It was for values. I posted a simple line there. We don't win by taking. We win by remembering. Because Kinex didn't lose Pharmatech because of Sundial's superiority. They lost them because they forgot what they once promised. The bigger shift. After the Pharmatech news broke, the floodgates opened. 4 other accounts approached me in 48 hours. No RFPs. No price comparisons. Just, we want what Pharmatech has. By now, I had hired a team of 6. Every one of them was someone I'd worked with before. Not superstars, but people who knew that precision is quiet and trust takes time. We didn't even have a marketing budget, but we had momentum. The kind no competitor could outbid. What they couldn't compete with. At Kinex, they still believed contracts were about price, features, interface. At Sundial, we knew the truth. Contracts happen after the relationship, and relationships happen when someone picks up the phone at 10 p.m. and says, We've got it. You don't need to worry. That's what we sold. Peace of mind. And no amount of automation could touch that. It arrived quietly, as these things often do. A LinkedIn post from Kinex Global. We're hiring a senior vice president of product integrity, seeking a seasoned operator with deep client empathy, domain experience in logistics software, and a proven record of building trust-centered platforms at scale. No flashy language this time. No buzzwords about disruption or AI-led growth. Just me. The post read like my resume had been reverse-engineered. 11 years of service, condensed into 5 bullet points written by someone now pretending I hadn't been part of their first line of code. They even used my exact phrasing. Trust isn't scalable, but it's transferable. I stared at the screen in stunned silence. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. They had finally realized what they'd lost. And now, they were trying to rebuild me in-house. But you can't reassemble a soul from scraps. The timing wasn't coincidence. The job post went live, 72 hours after Pharmatech signed with Sundial. It wasn't just an opening, it was a signal flare, an admission. Kinex was bleeding loyalty, not market share, and they were hoping someone, anyone, could plug the leak. It was a quiet kind of panic, the kind that comes not when you lose one client, but when you realize you've lost your compass. My team's reaction. I shared the job post in our Sundial Slack under the channel number Irony. Ashley, one of our product designers, replied, "You should apply. Just walk into the interview and ask them who built the system they're trying to recover." Jonas from Trident saw it too. He texted, "They trying to clone you in a lab?" I didn't laugh, because underneath the humor, there was something more dangerous happening. Kinex had finally remembered the importance of trust. But they'd forgotten you can't retroactively honor it. The recruiter call. A day after the post went live, I received a message from a recruiter. "Nathan, this might sound crazy, but Kinex is doing a deep rebuild. Clayton's restructuring senior leadership. They're quietly looking for someone with your profile." I replied with 3 words. "They had me." Her response was immediate. "So that's a no?" I didn't answer. Some question don't deserve reply. The strategic war begins. Kinex began aggressively pitching existing clients with discounts, bundling, and contract extensions. They dropped prices on routes Sundial had optimized. They even started mimicking interface elements we'd built from scratch down to layout and iconography. One client forwarded me an internal email. "Let's match Sundial's UX wherever possible. We don't need to rebuild their engine, just the experience." That told me everything. They weren't learning, they were imitating. But what they didn't know was this: you can't fake intuition. And clients can always smell fear, even when it comes wrapped in UI updates. The confrontation I didn't expect. Then came the real surprise. I was speaking at a small logistics summit in Austin. Nothing major, just a panel on post-pandemic resiliency in supply chains. I wasn't even listed as a headliner. But in the back of the room, during Q&A, a man raised his hand. He didn't introduce himself. He just asked, "Do you believe companies should value long-term trust over quarterly gains, even if that trust lives in a single person?" The room stilled. I knew the voice. It was Clayton Rowe. He was in the audience, looking at me not like a man who'd fired a mid-level VP, but like someone who realized he'd burned the blueprint. I leaned into the mic. "I think if your clients only trust one person, it's because the company never taught them to trust the system." Pause. "But if that person builds something better, and your clients follow them, maybe the system was never worthy of the trust in the first place." Clayton didn't move. Didn't blink. He just nodded once, and then quietly left the room. The job post disappears. 3 days later, the job posting vanished from LinkedIn. No hire announced. No repost. Just gone. Word circulated that Clayton had stepped down to pursue new ventures. Rumors said the board had pushed it. Another source said Everett Lang was now interim CEO. None of it mattered, because Sundial wasn't competing anymore. We weren't trying to win back what we'd lost. We were building what had never existed. A logistics company where every contract started with the phrase, "We remember what matters." A year to the day after I was let go, I walked into a different office zone with floor-to-ceiling windows and a conference room whose glass doors bore a name in etched lettering. The Heller Room. I hadn't asked for it. The team had done it without telling me. On the morning we signed our Series A round $22 million from investors who weren't interested in a logistics startup, but a platform rebuilding trust at the operational level. The irony? Some of the investors were former Kinex clients. Some had even sat across from me in boardrooms back when I was still building someone else's dream. But today, Sundial Systems wasn't a pilot anymore. It was a movement. What we built. In 12 months, we'd gone from a shadow pilot with Jonas at Trident to 38 active client accounts, $11.4 million in annualized revenue, customer retention, 100%, net promoter score, 92. And we did it with zero outbound sales. Every client came to us because they weren't looking for flash. They were looking for someone who picked up the phone. And our team? Not poached from giants, not stolen from unicorns. We hired people who understood a simple mantra. Trust is built in seconds and broken in silence. The unexpected visitor. One Thursday, as I prepped for our internal town hall, my assistant knocked softly. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "No appointment. Said you'd understand." I looked up, and there he was, Clayton Rowe. It looked smaller, not physically, but in spirit. The sharpness in his posture had softened. He no longer looked like the man who had given me that sterile termination email over coffee and strategy decks. "Do you have 5 minutes?" he asked. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. The last conversation. We sat in the Heller room. He glanced at the name on the glass, the skyline outside. Then, he spoke. "I should have never let them talk me into it," he said. "You were the center, Nathan. The culture, the memory. The product wasn't the platform. You were." He looked me in the eye. "I came to say I'm sorry. Not for the business. For forgetting what the business was supposed to be." I let the silence settle. Then said, "Apology accepted. But we're not the same company anymore." He nodded. "I know." Then he reached into his coat and placed something on the table. A sundial onboarding packet. "I know 3 companies right now trying to switch to you. I wanted to see how the future is being built." I picked up the folder, not to impress him, but to remind myself. This is what happens when you stop trying to win back something broken and build something no one dares take from you again. The town hall. That afternoon, I stood before 42 team members. Some were ex-Kinex. Some were ex-nobodies like I used to be. Some were brand new, fresh out of school, still believing product was king. I smiled. "No slides today," I said. "Just a thought." They leaned in. A year ago, I was let go with a folder and a handshake. No press release, no goodbye party. Just an empty chair where I used to sit. I looked around the room, but I didn't lose my work. I didn't lose what mattered. Because the real value doesn't live in the org chart. It lives in the people who remember. And if we keep remembering what matters to our clients, we'll never lose a thing again. Applause was quiet, respectful, the kind that didn't come from charisma, but clarity. One last message. That night, I received a message on LinkedIn from Eden Shaw, the new CEO of what remained of Kinex. "We've officially rebranded. Kinex is now Alloy Systems. Trying to move forward. I hope we do it better this time." I replied, "I hope so too." Then, I archived the message, not out of spite, but because that chapter was over, and so was I. As I left the office, I passed the etched glass again. The Heller room. I traced a finger over my name, not with pride, but with peace, because revenge never builds legacy. Only memory does. And I had finally built something worth remembering.